Hello, everyone. I am really pleased to welcome you to London Glassblowing, to the gallery at London Glassblowing, where we have a wonderful show. It's the 25th anniversary of the Contemporary Glass Society, and we have a themed show on this occasion. The theme was Earth, Sea and Sky, and we have over 100 pieces here by 40 artists from around the country and from abroad too. It was a juried show. It's curated by Catherine Schilling, beautifully curated, and we're very proud of it, and we're absolutely delighted that you could join us this evening. It's not easy for everyone to get here, and it would be a great shame if a great many of you miss seeing it all together. So we're going to start with Katie Husky. This is, she's a blower who works in partnership with James Devereux down at Devereux Husky in Wiltshire, and makes stunning work, and her latest work involves neon, and we'll get to that a little way through the show, as it were. Then we'll just move along as it were throughout the show and try and include as many people as we can. We've got quite a number of wall pieces in this exhibition, and this first one is by Susan Kinley, and has to do, it's using water jet cutting, and I'll talk a little bit more about water jet cutting later on as well when we get to Vanessa Cutler's work, because she's been a pioneer in this field, and I think Susan may well have been someone who's worked with her or under her or taken advantage of her researches. A very pretty bowl by, which is a fused bowl with applied powdered colour by Susan Sinclair. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about Verity Pulford, simply because I absolutely adore these things. They're, for the most part, kiln worked, with some fused, slumped forms, which are combined in some cases with natural objects, very delicately used in a very delicate fashion, in my opinion. I think the colouring is exquisite. She also makes these in more three-dimensional forms, and I'm hoping that at some future time we'll be able to show those as well. The next person whose work I'd like, simply because we're looking in detail now, is I'd like to talk about Rachel Elliot briefly, and this is using cast and sintered glass in combination, and Rachel works in Edinburgh, where she has concentrated on extraordinarily precise detail. So this nautilus shell is accurate almost to the nth degree, is mathematically correct and absolutely exquisitely done. I myself am interested in ammonites and nautilus shells and so on, and so I'm in awe, really. The next group is so one of the points of this exhibition was to collaborate in some shape or form with either with another artist, or to use more than one medium in combination, or to play with technique and combine techniques and so on. So this particular group are by Monette Larson with a ceramicist called Megan Roden, and these are so different. These are a wonderful example of how a theme can spur you to, or challenge you to try totally new areas of activity. So this earth, sea, sky, this beautiful graduation of color through ceramic, porcelain and glass, and this, again, this sort of stacked wall piece where we're going through strata into, you know, through a sunset into a magnificent sort of mixed cloud-like blue sky area. Again, seen in this Pat de Verre piece next door, a similar kind of inspiration, and the way they've been juxtaposed, I think, has worked incredibly well. So having a theme like this does mean that people are challenged to work in ways or areas of activity that they wouldn't normally work in. That's not necessarily true of Laura Quinn, who has been working in this manner for some time, and you know, it may well be that, but there's a very ethereal quality about some of her work. Not all of it, but it, you know, one has this sense that, you know, if one had found these objects on the beach, you would be absolutely staggered. And she has developed a way of working with silicon in combination with glass. So these elements, these are blown pieces. This one's been etched, and she's used silicon in combination with lamp working, whereas these elements, in this case, again, they're mounted in silicon, so the whole thing is incredibly well made and wonderfully safe, beautifully mounted here. It's a technique that she's evolved, and each of these is actually removable. I'm not going to do that because I'm a little bit scared I might not get it back in the right place, but they are beautifully engineered, beautifully made, and bewitching in their way. Here we've got, this is an enameled, a painted piece using an enameling technique. I'm fascinated because there aren't very many people using enamels well in this day and age. It's a method of working that has fallen to a large extent into disuse. So I talked earlier about Catherine Husky's ventures into neon. This is a new departure for her. She actually was awarded a Quest, Queen Elizabeth Scholarship Trust, yes, a Quest award to research and use neon. Neon is another of these dying arts. So enameling, we talked about a moment ago, neon, which is generally used for signage and for quirky little signs that people tend to have in their homes. She has begun to study how to use it, how to create the colors that she needs for a particular effect, and her object as a hot worker, as a blower, was to use it in combination with hot work glass. And each of these this panel is fused, made up of a lot of hot worked elements, each of which she's made individually before fusing them together, and then the whole piece is what isn't apparent, perhaps, because the verticals are rather strong, is that the horizontal neons here, and rather than connecting them all each one is separately connected. They're argon filled. The tubes are filled with argon, which gives her a greater range of colors. And in order to keep her options open about how the colors work together, they are all individual units, each element there. A measure of the curation is this lovely color sequence here that actually carries on into my pieces too. But in the meantime, There's a cast piece by one of the country's foremost casters. It's a fused cast piece by Angela Jarman with some surface cutting, which gives it an interesting sort of sparkle. It's very much about seascape and light, really, the use of light. My pieces for this show have been, I've been fascinated by clouds for a long time, and I keep returning to the subject or the theme, and this exhibition theme gave me the opportunity to go there yet again. I've been working on this idea really since the late 80s or mid 80s even, one way or another, and I've fairly recently resolved to do an homage to Marguerite. I don't know how that's going to turn out. That's a fairly recent decision. But, you know, what a ridiculous idea to try to capture the essence of a cloud, you know, in glass. But anyway, I'm doing it. And it's given me, it makes me look at clouds in quite a different way. And although, you know, these are somewhat fairly stylized, it may be that sooner or later I'll come through with it, you know, I keep trying. This is a really interesting piece by Janine Greenberg. It's beautifully mounted, and it's using a technique that I'm not familiar with, and that using some paper called glassine or glassine. Presumably it comes from America. I haven't come across it before. So we mentioned water jet cutting, so that involves a computer to use a machine with water and sand to cut, which can be used like a laser cutter in a sense. And this is a piece by Pamina Patel, strong cultural connections that she's wishing to express. Cleverly done, you know, each element is cut from the larger element right the way through, and the base, which is a beautiful piece of marble, is also cut in the same fashion. While we're here, let's look at this, which is another engineered piece, if you like, by one of our foremost engravers, Nancy Sutcliffe. I think there are 30 surfaces of which she's engraved each one, and this and she's incorporated Japanese gold foil in the pink gold in the piece, and it's quite a spectacular little thing. So Julie Light has made these pattes de verre. She's developed a technique of what we call normally, so patte de verre is made from granulated or powdered glass, fused, and normally it's done inside a mold, and she has developed a technique of somehow doing it on the outside in order to create these three-dimensional forms, and then combine it with these copper elements. And again, of course, there's a fungal, if you like, or there's certainly a very natural earthy feel about these, despite their almost luminous or neon-like color. Fiona Fawcett's cast piece, which is combined with slate, is inspired by seascape and landscape in the area that she lives in, polished on the front surface to expose the textures on the back of the piece, which we may see from the other side when we move round this plinth. One of our foremost glass sculptors, one of the country's foremost glass sculptors, is David Ricci. We've shown a number of his pieces in the past, but I have to say I personally think this is a really exceptional piece. This is I I hope he won't be, should he be listening, won't be hurt if I say this is one of the best pieces we've had for quite some time. I rather covet it, so unless somebody else snaps it up, I'm hoping it might find its way to our house. His work is generally social comment. His pieces are about the human condition, and this is very much about that sort of, his title is Failing to Act, but it's very much about that kind of miscommunication that occurs quite frequently, sadly, in this day and age, or always has, perhaps, but he's got a particularly cryptic way of expressing it. So yes, and then we've got some boulders from Linda Norris, who lives and works in Wales and has been inspired by beach combing in those areas. They're quite different to the pebbles I found in Greece, which were generally white or pale in color. These are quite somber, but simple, strong shapes, and I've enjoyed looking at them. By contrast, with those, perhaps we should look at this point at Juliette Lepellier's work. So she lives and works in France. She is the daughter of Etienne Lepellier, a famous French glass artist. He and his brother, Antoine Lepellier, are amongst France's foremost glass artists. And her grandfather was François de Cauchemont, who is credited with inventing pâte de verre, or reinventing pâte de verre, let's put it that way, bringing it into the 20th century. And they still work in Conches, in northern France, in the village that de Cauchemont set up his original furnace. And I think these are stunning pieces. I'm enjoying the play of light, on these forms, and the solidity of this kind of frozen moment. Well, the lightness and the weight, if you like, of these pieces, combined with these pebbles that she has found. Oh, a couple more clouds. I suppose what I like about this pair is that they can be juxtaposed in, well, at least 4 combinations, possibly more, by simply moving them around. I'm allowed to do that. This is mine, can overlap them, you can have them in or you can turn them round, and of course they look different from the other side. This seems to work quite well, and again, the negative shape, the space between, is quite important. So, getting that right is, working out how these shapes combine is quite important to me. Before we get to this, let's have a look at Noor El Huda Awad's piece, which is fuse cast, and again refers this beautiful sky and the way that moves from blue, this sea element, and the beach or the land. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous colors. Really, I think we're not seeing it at its best because we have our main door closed at the moment. But when the daylight comes through this piece, it really is stunning. Thank you, Anthony. Does that help? And this gives it a sense of scale. Very nicely finished, and again, very, very beautifully mounted. I like this. very much. So, Vanessa Cutler, she is the pioneer, she's considered to be the pioneer in this country of the use of the water jet. And these are constructed pieces, these are computer aided, both in their development, water jet cutting, and then the elements have also been cast. So they're very complex pieces. I suppose the point that one might make about these, and indeed virtually everything in this exhibition, is how much time, effort, energy, cost goes into the making of these. I mean, they, you know, glass is still relatively undervalued, undercollected. I think it's a great opportunity for anybody who wants to collect artworks. You know, glass has this wonderful capacity to transmit light, as it's shown in Kate Gillies' pieces. She works with her husband Stephen up in Yorkshire, in North Yorkshire, Rosedale Glass Studio, and her work is very precisely sandblasted, beautifully done actually, generally slightly with a slightly more organic feel. Perhaps the other one is so, and she takes her inspiration from land management, furrows and fields and forests in the area around her studio, and she has been exploring that theme for many years in her work. Generally these are produced as bowls or dishes. In this case they're roundels, which again have been very beautifully mounted up. This is a collaboration between Jackie Edwards and Yvette Bartlett. So Yvette Bartlett is a printmaker and Jackie is the glass artist, and they've created a book. I'm going to just show you how this works. So she has it, they've had numerous conversations and Zooms and produced the work separately and then combined it. I mean, you know, it's all about the state of the world and problems that exist of refugees and the causes of refugees. I mean, I find this piece, this print, incredibly topical somehow. You know, are those bullet holes? I mean, is this referring to the Ukraine, or are these holes in a dinghy, or is this a seascape? Or, you know, there are questions being asked here, and again, what a huge amount of work has gone into producing each page here. So here we've got, this is another print called Sanctuary. My goodness, whoever acquires this will have something of enormous, which will give enormous pleasure over a great deal of time. So these are, again, enamel, writing with enamel paint, and here are this print. This one is called Wrench, and one has that sense of loss and leaving and separation, and it's beautifully put together with a leather binding, a repurposed leather binding. They've even made a what's it called? Not a plinth, it's a lectern for this book. So these are pieces by Pippa Stacey in combination with a silversmith called Liz Pearson, and there are a number of these. They're fused with precious foils and colour they're fused layers and then ground and polished into these sort of lozenge shapes. And another pendant and brooch by Effie Burns again with the silversmith Emily Georgina Jones. Hannah Gibson works solely with recycled glass, and she has been working on this Lego theme now for a number of years, and it's serving her extremely well. She's now showing these internationally in some of the best galleries in the country. Not on this scale, these are very small pieces. She also makes very large ones, and not only does she recycle the glass, but many of the elements that are contained within the glass are recycled. Moving on to Andrea Spencer, who lives in Northern Ireland. Her work is exclusively about natural forms, and very often she creates these. So she's using what's called lampworking, a lampworking technique, where she's pulled out very, very thin glass fibers or glass elements, and then fused them and created this very naturalistic seaweed like quality. Many of the pieces, the kind of pieces we've had before, have tended to be incredible sea pods or seed pods. And the detail is extraordinary, and the delicacy of the pieces is extraordinary. I suppose while we're on that theme, shall we look at Dominique Fondé's pieces? He lives in Japan, and he's worked with Tominaga-san, or her name is Junko Tominaga, and she presses the leaves and seed pods that she finds under something like 2 tons of pressure, and then glues them, sticks them to a backing. And I think Dominic asked if she'd be willing to collaborate in this way, and so he's done the engraving with an engraver that looks a little bit like a dental tool, but his great claim to fame is the use of stipple engraving, which is even more complex and finer than these, but that is so beautiful, that hair. A couple of pieces up here by Deborah Timperley, and these again are fused cast. So she creates the elements and then casts them together, fuses them in the kiln at round about 800 degrees centigrade in various compositions, and obviously enjoying this sense of building, like taking inspiration from dry stone walls and areas of rock that she's come across. Very delicate engraving on her pieces. And there are a couple of paperweights here by Chi Son Chang, who's a Chinese student. I'd like to look at one of my favorite pieces next, if we could. This piece has been sent from Canada, and it's a combination of 2 techniques. So the bottom section is kiln cast, and the top section is made using a technique of fusing powders in layers, a little bit like a computer, what's the expression? 3D printing. Yes, only it's done manually. It's not done by machine. It's not. So she's built it up over time. And it's very much about time and erosion. And it's a theme that's appealed to me. Yes, shall we move on to these? This is very new work by Ruth Shelley, Many of you will be familiar with her more textile-based pieces, if you like. These are created very much like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. They're cut elements, glass elements which have been put together, as I said, like a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle, flat, fused, and then slumped into a mold. And this rather free painterly pair is an entirely new approach visually. I mean, it's using much the same techniques, but in a totally different way, and much freer and and actually very refreshing. Again, I'm enjoying those immensely. I try to work in a painterly fashion myself, as indeed does Jian Yong Gu. The jury for this show, of which I was one of the members, really found these pieces refreshing. We hadn't actually realized, or I hadn't realized at the time, quite the scale of them, and they have aroused a lot of interest, and they're a splash of color and vitality and dynamic movement that we haven't seen around for some time. And having said that, by contrast, this is painted on the interior of the form through a tiny, tiny little hole. It's extraordinary. I think there's interior painting on all these pieces, but this one of all is totally remarkable. Samantha Donaldson, Exarcier, pebble-like forms, nice, very nice optical effects with the shape, the way the color is reflected through the shapes. 3 panels here by Helen Grayson. Helen is self-taught, and again, the jury liked the strength of these pieces, the vitality, the depth of her thinking, the text that she's incorporated. So this is a response to the wildfires that seem to be raging more frequently. Interesting trio. So let's look at a couple of mixed media pieces. These are a combination of cast, sand cast, and cast. Again, we've got text incorporated and copper. So the metal encloses the glass, and the metal itself is caught and incorporated through the process of the casting. So that I think one of these pieces is called Copper-Held Glass Holds Copper. And they're great to touch. I mean, I love the quality of this thing and the movement somehow, this and the copper itself has been affected by the firing so that it's burnt and crushed. I think this is a great idea. I think blowing into copper might be an area that would be worth exploring. But in this case, these bronze pieces which have been fabricated, they're quite light, they're hollow, they incorporate cast elements, or in this case, a cast element incorporates the metalwork. So there is a symbiosis here. There's a between these connection between these pieces, and this is actually cast directly from a rock with barnacles, and they're by Cara Wessenberg, and I only recently discovered that I remember seeing an image of a piece I really loved, which turned out to be hers at her graduation. She was at Farnham, at the University of Creative Arts in Farnham. And I didn't know it was by her, so I'll be able to compliment her next time I see her. So I think we're getting round. I wonder, could we have dim the lights for a second, just so that we can see Tim's piece properly. So this is a piece by Tim Rawlinson in collaboration with a woodworker called Graham Reeves, a friend of his. Graham's normally engaged in building huge exhibition sets for the V&A and places like that, but he's turned his hand to helping Tim, in this instance, create this really nice piece. And we aren't doing it justice in the exhibition because we aren't able to show it as you're seeing it with the lights low, but I'm quite sure that someone will have a corner in their home where this is going to end up. We can't get enough of Tim's work these days. He's selling it in Florida and Detroit and New York, and it walks out of the gallery the minute it hits. So this is a totally new dimension. I mean, his work is always about light and transmitting light and so on, but this is the first time he's, well, in my knowledge anyway, that he's incorporated an illuminated base to create this gorgeous aura almost of light. You know, it's like the most wonderful sunset or northern light that one could ever see. You know, perfect, almost cosmic. So we're getting to the end of the show. We've got a couple more pieces that we should look at. These are a couple of quite solid, thickly fused cast pieces by Sarah Brown. She has tried hard to convey the qualities of mist in the morning, if you like, in, you know, the kind of looking out of her window of a morning, and she's tried to get that sense of space and depth, and particularly she talks quite a lot about mist, but she's incorporated some dichroic, or maybe it's not dichroic, maybe they're just bubbles, but there are these wonderful sparkly elements that occasionally you can see. Yeah, here they are again. I wonder if there's a slight use of dichroic in there somehow. If not, that would be, I mean, the lovely textures too. And finally, we've got a couple of blown pieces up here by Emma Goring. I'm currently working on patchwork, so these are right up my street, although they're very different to what I'm working on. So, but I'm enjoying that, the use. In her case, she's using preformed Morini. So yes, Sogon Kim has just literally days ago, she's one of your students, I guess, and has been teaching, working at the RCA, and Sogon Kim has just graduated. These are called celestial forms, and we have celestial black, amber, and blue, and I think she's having great success with these pieces. I saw a number of red dots when I visited the degree show. She is going to bring us some more, I believe, so that's good. And finally, this, again, a piece that's very much, that I particularly have enjoyed enormously, and I have to apologize that you're not seeing it with backlighting because our big shutter is closed. Jane Vincent gets her glass from a company in Reading, and she's told me that when she walked out of the store, there was this wonderful gasometer, and she took lots of photographs of it, bits of it, but sadly it's no longer there. It's gone. So really it's preserved in her piece. And I love the way she's mounted this with a kind of Meccano of, she did tell me what this was. Oh, I remember, yes. It's the kind of metal that you use when you're plastering a corner. I think it's brilliant use of the material, and it so works with her, with the way that she's presented this. You know, I think she's presented it really well. And some of these, some of these are delicious, aren't they? The detail and so on. So they are printed with ceramic or glass enamels again, and fired on. I hope you've enjoyed this this tour, as it were, of the show. We're very proud of it. We wanted to share it. And as I said right at the beginning, we are very willing. In fact, they're very enjoyable, the one-to-ones. So that means that if there's something you want to see, you can call in and make an appointment, and one of us, possibly me, possibly Isabel, will take you round and show you. If, for instance, you want to see Verity's work in more detail, because we've had to skim over everything, or anything. As I said earlier, there's no obligation, so you don't need to worry. We're happy to do it. We want to promote the work. We want people to see it and, be our guests. And thank you for joining us.